Have you ever been in a situation, one that moves you or amuses you no end, and when you start to explain it to someone, and you see that look in their eyes, a kind of blank, I don't really get it stare, and then you know what we say. We say, you just had to be there. Case in point, after being amazed, awed, amused, and maybe a little shocked by Antonin Dvorak's lyric fairy tale opera Rusalka, you may try to explain it to your friends, and I predict you will be telling them, you just have to see it. The reason this opera is so difficult to describe is because of the way it simultaneously affects us, inside and out. Outside, because the music and spectacle of the opera, and inside, because of what it evoked from our own lives, our own adolescent coming of age. I'm Don Feinberg, back with another segment of Opera Insight 2023. Today, we take up the challenge of describing this many-layered, psychologically poignant tale in the opera Rusalka. Sir David Pountney directs this production. It blends the fairy tale quality of The Little Mermaid with the rite of passage in a coming-of-age story, a story in which a girl's adolescent longings empower a bridge to womanhood, but not without cost. Traditionally, this opera is set in a fairy tale land by a lake. In our production, there is a pond, but that's part of the landscape of a therapeutic residential institute. The music draws us into this fantasy world. Our dreamy title character has a wistful longing to grow up and embrace her prince. Written in 1900, Dvorak's Rusalka is considered one of the first modern operas. But what makes it modern? Eric Kandel, the Nobel Prize winner, describes modernity as the zeitgeist of 1900, the turn of the century. Zeitgeist is one of those terms that means different things to different people, but you can think of it as the defining spirit of a particular period of history, as shown by the thinking and beliefs of that time. Modern opera has certain qualities evident in Rusalka that still characterize great current operas. And since this is Opera Insight, you won't be surprised to learn that these qualities not only inform opera, but involve psychology as well. So what might these qualities be? First, we are motivated by powerful forces, albeit buried forces within us. And we have two basic instincts or drives, the passionate erotic ones and the aggressive, often destructive one. The former is called life instinct, and the latter, not surprisingly, death instinct. Second, these instincts lie beneath the surface of our awareness. The truth needs to be uncovered or interpreted as it occurs to us in our dreams, or as in the case of this opera Rusalka, in the characters and stories of folklore and fairy tales. Even a fairy story like this opera reflects psychological truth to which we relate, and it can inform us about our own understanding of our own lives. Third, we understand actions in the present to be a product of the influences of our past. So in sum, unconscious powerful instincts of passion and aggression shaped by our pasts help us to understand ourselves in the present. This psychological idea is represented in all great art, and no art represents it more powerfully than opera. Modern opera like Rusalka grabs us, not because of a linear narrative, but because of the fairy tale quality, which speaks volumes to our inner motivations and understanding of our own childhoods in the brink of adulthood. As the opera opens, three other young teen girls tease the wood sprite, Vladnik, Rusalka's father figure. It reminds me of the kind of interaction we expect in junior high school with teasing and flirting. We meet Rusalka feeling sad. She confesses her desire to leave the residential home of childhood and join the people outside of it. She wants a soul and give up her immortality to obtain it. Her father warns her, it's not worth it. The soul is, quote, full of sin. As the opera opens, we are in the face of two different levels of experience in this lush operatic score. It can be a simple fairy tale or an allegory for every father's concern for their daughters growing up, becoming independent and sexually active. You know, full of sin. Rusalka confirms that this is precisely what she had in mind because she loves a human and longs to embrace him and kiss him. But in her more childlike state, she could not even be noticed. This would not be possible unless she transforms. Again, two simultaneous approaches are put forward. From the fairy tale point of view, we are talking about magical transformation, a mermaid trading her flippers in for a pair of legs. But from the point of view of adolescent development, we are talking about physical changes of growing up. At this point, Rusalka sings her famous aria, Song to the Moon. Now, without knowing which opera it was from or what the words mean, the longing conveyed in this music is palpable. When you hear it in the opera, perhaps it will have a familiar ring. You may have heard it on a collection of unforgettable arias, or in concerts by artists like Renee Fleming, or perhaps you remember it as a part of innumerable romantic movie soundtracks. It's a kind of standalone aria in this piece, more the exception than the rule. Rusalka, the opera, is through composed with a lush score filled with the anticipations of a coming-of-age story. At this point, against her father's advice, she summons Jezubaba. Her name literally means hag or witch in Czech. She's old and resentful. Now, in the modern story, we ask, what turned her into this mean-spirited witch of a person? What abuse had she suffered that she's now about to impose on our heroine? Rusalka knows that she's world-wise, and she can teach her about what changes happen in an adolescent, body and soul, and she knows how those changes can inform her longing for love. But the hag's wisdom has a bitter legacy. She manipulates Rusalka. Rusalka must agree to go mute as a human, and Jezubaba plants a poison seed that later bears poison fruit. If you lose your love, you will return to the watery depths and you will destroy your lover. He will, quote, become the victim of your eternal damnation. Rusalka replies, with a pure human soul, my love shall overcome all spells. Jezubaba knows the bitter truth that a pure human soul is a contradiction in terms, and Rusalka's fate is sealed. Rusalka, a Little Mermaid-inspired character, does get her legs to walk on. But in this psychodrama, the conversion is not a swish of a magic wand or the instant pop of an activated potion, but a painful reminder of an adolescent transition. I will leave the stagecraft moment as a surprise, but you will witness the way this modernized fairy tale tells its story. Shortly after the transformation, the prince arrives. This is where the magic of love enters the picture, for the prince says quite overtly that he has been captured by love. Who among us can forget the magic of the first adolescent love? He is taken with the mute Rusalka and returns with her to the castle. What is it with these quiet women by the water? This is the second time this season that the quiet bride or bride-to-be gets taken to the castle. Well, it didn't turn out so well for Melisande, and for Rusalka, we'll have to see. The narrative continues to unfold by the strange caretakers at the facility, groundskeeper and son, talking about the prince and his intention to marry the mute girl. These characters are both comic and grotesque, reminiscent types in the fairy tales. They note that the prince is fickle and also has eyes for the foreign princess. Note, their names are Prince and Foreign Princess. That's actually their names of the characters in the fairy tale drama. Now you might ask, why does the story call Rusalka by name? Well, this is not quite a mystery. Rusalka is the Czech word for undine or water nymph. Sometimes things do get a little confusing in translation. For example, on the visit to the La Brea tar pits in Los Angeles, I recently learned that Brea means tar pit. La Brea tar means the tar pits, so when people say the La Brea tar pits, they're actually saying the tar pit, tar pit. We named the tar pit Tar Pit. Well, it's just like our title character in the opera. The water nymph is named Water Nymph. And on land, she is literally out of her element. And with the sexy foreign princess in the picture, she's out of her league as well. Sure enough, foreign princess vows to break up the prince and his pale, mute beloved. We look at the elements of the story. A young girl becomes emotionally and erotically interested in her prince. She turns mute. How many of us have known young girls who are outspoken and spunky as latency age 11-year-olds, who become tongue-tied in the face of adolescent dating and relationships? And the prince and foreign princess, here we create the powerful love triangle that often drives these stories. How many girls have had their adolescent longings crushed by another girl's ability to attract the person that she was interested in? And the converse, how many adolescents, both young women and men, find themselves attracted to someone because they are the object of someone else's interest? And driven by this experience of the love triangle, they go on to compete for the affection of another adolescent's love interest. Now, at this point in the opera, the emotionally engaging music combined with a symbolic score have us in a swirl of memory of how we became the people we are today. For a century, opera goers have found this music personally evocative. Meanwhile, the prince throws a party, and he does, in fact, court the seductive foreign princess. Rusalka sees them. It breaks her heart. She runs out. And for that matter, so do we, because it is here in the middle of Act 2 that we have our single intermission. When we return to the opera, we find Rusalka return to her father. The confused prince, conscious of his passionate attraction to the foreign princess, but still longing for the cool embrace of the white light of the moon. It kind of reminds us of Cavaradossi, Tosca's lover, whose opening aria describes his obsession with the cool blonde mystery woman that inspires his portrait of Mary, simultaneous with the passionate love he feels for hot-tempered Tosca. The details aren't as important as the realization that there with Tosca, as here with the prince, the love triangle in their head eventually leads to their undoing. The prince is simultaneously seduced by the princess and never really giving up on Rusalka. And like any fellow that wants to put one foot in the boat but leave the other one on the dock, they usually end up in trouble and in the water. Sure enough, Rusalka has left him, and because of his ambivalence, the foreign princess tells him to literally, quote, to go to hell, unquote. It's an opera. So to conclude Act 2, the foreign princess sings, "Into the nameless abyss of hell, hurry after your chosen one." Rusalka is back in the Institute, giving up her girlhood and not achieving mature love. She appeals to Jezebaba. Her unsympathetic response suggests the kind of punitive told you so that jealous mothers heap on their daughters who dare to enter the realm of sexuality against their parents' advice. She sings, "Short was the loving, long will be the moaning. After kisses from a man's lips, endless eternal fasting. Humans are humans, cast out by the elements, long ago, torn from the roots of the earth. Wretched, the one who wanted to know human love, the one whom human betrayal has now damned." And then she lays a real Sophie's Choice on her, in which the cure will only double break Rusalka's heart. "You'll be again what you were before the world deceived you. But only the heat of human blood can cure you, freed of all torments. You'll be happy at once if your hand kills the one who deceived you, seduced you." Now, Rusalka refuses. She holds to a higher view of the soul she longed to inhabit. She would rather suffer eternally to save her beloved from death than to murder him. That's the truth that underlies her love. Here we find echoes of Senta and the Dutchman, but unlike the redemption of the Dutchman, this is where this opera takes a turn for the darker view of human psyche. Humans are not in control of their instinctive inclination towards erotic passion and bloodlust. Jezebaba tells Rusalka in no uncertain terms, humans are not humans until they've wet their hands in another's blood. When incited by passion, they've become drunk on the blood of a neighbor. And you wanted to be a human and intoxicate a man with passion? Even her contemporaries, other girls, tell her to become a will-o'-the-wisp and lure unsuspecting men to their deaths. Now this is a familiar archetype. These are the Nixies. Many of us know them as Homeric sirens. They beckon Odysseus to doom himself and his crew by crashing his ship on the rocks. In German literature, the Lorelei are Nixies who sit on the rocks beside the Rhine River and lure men to their deaths by dragging them under. Rusalka joins a long line of mythical femme fatales. In the next scene, the groundkeeper and boy reappear to seek advice from Jezebaba because their prince is mad with regret because he realized his mistake and Rusalka is gone. The whole castle remains in a magical stupor since the devil himself carried Rusalka off to hell. Well, that was about all that Vodnik can take. He's furious. He tells them in no uncertain terms that it's the prince that betrayed Rusalka and not the other way around. Human folly has ruined her, and he will take revenge any way he can. The wood nymphs return to flirt again as they had before, but now with a more seductive set of allures. Their games are cut short as the prince enters the scene. He laments causing Rusalka's death and begs for forgiveness. Rusalka still longs for her innocent state, not really having become the grown-up person she wished to be. In the next passage, we in the audience get to decide. Is she asking rhetorically, or is she confronting the prince when she sings in what critics have called among the best 12 minutes in opera? Why did you call me into your arms? Why did your lips lie? Now I'm a moonlit apparition for your eternal torture. Now I deceive you in the dark of night. My womanhood is defiled, and with the will-o'-the-wisps on the water, I entice you into the depths. Why did you call me into your arms? And now, if I kiss you, you're lost completely. The prince chooses the kiss of death as a way to absolve himself of sin, and he states, I die happy in your embrace. Vodnik points out that his sacrifice is in vain. Rusalka cannot be redeemed. She understands what it means to be a person who suffers and dies. And she sings, for your love, for that beauty of yours, for your inconstant human passion, for everything by which my fate is cursed. Human soul, God, have mercy on you. In these final moments, we see our human condition lodged in the beauty of the music. You can decide whether this music tells us a story of a fairy tale or an allegory of a young woman's passage into womanhood, or both. Is it a cautionary tale about basic human instincts? Or is it an affirmation of our capacity for love in our time-limited journey of discovery, literally the time of our life? When we resume the next segment of Opera Insight, we encounter a very different kind of journey of love, lost and found again in Monteverdi's Orfeo. We'll see you then.